Hello, this is Lady Boulay, and I hope you're having a wonderful day. Thank you for your support. Thank you for all you do to uplift this channel. And yes, we are commanded to love one another, whether we want to or not, or whether we agree with each other or not. And today we're going back in history and coming up to the present and talk about how slave money still works in America. See, people think that slavery was a long time ago and we need to get over it because what happened in the past can't be fixed in the future and we just need to get on with it. And we could get on with it, but the effects of slavery are still here. You know what they say, DNA has memory. So there are things that we're remembering in our bodies from slavery, but there are some real tangibles that are still working in the American society to this day. So we need to look at that because why should we get over it? Why should we get over a system that benefited everybody but our family members who worked that system and built the wealth of that system or built much of the wealth of that system? So let me show you something.
I posted a video about how slave money never left, and a lot of y'all were asking, well, who's still benefiting? Okay, so let's start with this. A whole lineup of people that are running this country are living off of wealth built on slavery. Not metaphorically, not spiritually. I'm talking actual descendants of enslavers writing laws, cutting checks, and holding office. And we're gonna name them. Some of them, anyway. So let's get into it. In 2023, Reuters dropped a study identifying more than 100 current U.S. leaders in Congress and governors' mansions on the Supreme Court who can trace their families back to slaveholders. And guess what? Those families, they never gave back a cent, never paid restitution, never lost land. They just passed the money and the power. So let's name names. Y'all are not gonna like me for this. Oh, gosh. President Joe Biden. His mother's side goes back to enslavers. Supreme Court Justices Amy Coney Barrett and Neil Gorsuch. Yeah, they descended from enslavers too. Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, Tom Cotton, Nancy Mace, James Lankford. All senators, all tied to slavery through family. Even Michigan's Gary Peters and Debbie Stabenow have that lineage. But you don't see them addressing it, do you? And before you ask, no, Trump is not on this list. His people got here after slavery ended. But don't get it twisted, he is still knee-deep in white supremacy. Asa Hutchinson and Doug Burgum, both 2024 GOP presidential candidates, also have documented enslaver ancestors. Do you think they're passing policies without that legacy baked in? And here's the real kicker. A PLOS One study showed that lawmakers whose families enslaved 16 or more people have a median net worth of nearly $4 million higher than their colleagues who don't have that lineage. Even when you adjust for age, education, and race. That's not a coincidence, that's inheritance. That's power passed down while Black folks were handed nothing but freedom in a world that was rigged against them. Professor Henry Louis Gates said it best. We do not inherit guilt for our ancestors' actions, but we do inherit the legacies. So ask yourself, why do we keep pretending that the past is the past? When it's sitting in the Senate, the Supreme Court, and the governor's mansions, their family names are still on bank accounts, endowments, and legislation. And most of them haven't said a word. This isn't about blame, it's about truth. Because if we don't name the power, we can't challenge the system that protects it.
So now we see why we can't get any legislation passed to address slavery and reparations and the damage that was done to Black families because of slavery. Because they've convinced themselves or they have hypnotized the public into believing that it was so long ago and there's nobody alive today that was a slave or that owned slaves. Well, they're right about that because it did end over 160 something years ago. But the reality is that money is still here. And she just named public officials. But there are people who are just walking around regular who still have land that was taken during those days and paid for by slave labor. As a matter of fact, a few years ago, one of my coworkers and her husband were trying to buy a house in an affluent area and they didn't have all of the down payment money. Well, she sold land that had been in her family since the slavery days and got the money to make the down payment on that house. So that slave money is still working. And not only that, some of these companies that we do business with today, they just seem like, Fortune 500 companies. But guess what? Many of those companies began during the slavery days. And those families are still reaping the benefits of that slave labor, because that slave labor is what paid for whatever it is they brought into the 21st century. And this is a very short list. It's a whole lot of them. The wealth of this country was built on the backs of the enslaved people. Let us not forget that. Now, everybody, let's look at 15 elite colleges that owe their foundations to enslaved labor. Number one, Harvard University. Number two, Yale University. Number three, Princeton University. Number four, Brown University. Number five, Columbia University. Number six, the University of Pennsylvania. Number seven, Georgetown University. Number eight, Dartmouth College. Number nine, University of Virginia. Number 10, Williams College. Number 11, Rutgers University. Number 12, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Number 13, Johns Hopkins University. Number 14, University of South Carolina. And number 15, University of Georgia. Now, these are just the elite schools, but you can throw in the University of Alabama, University of Tennessee, University of Arkansas, University of Texas, any of these southern universities, and you know that they were built by enslaved people. As a matter of fact, probably all of them. We know that the southern universities and these elite schools that are not even in the South were built on the backs of the enslaved people. These schools are still making money. Harvard University has probably about let me see. Harvard University has about a $54 billion endowment, which is their financial assets. So these schools are still making money off of slave labor. Still making money off slave labor. And not only that, making it difficult to impossible for the descendants of slavery to even get into these schools. Now, let's talk about the presidential mansions that were built and paid for by the enslaved people. The White House is the most prominent example of a presidential mansion built with enslaved labor. Construction began in 1792, and although the original plan was to hire European workers, the effort fell short. Surprise, surprise. As a result, enslaved Africans were forced to provide the bulk of the labor. They quarried stone, sawed logs, and performed skills like carpentry, masonry, and painting. So this is not picking cotton, y'all. This is sophisticated construction work. Enslaved workers were often rented from their owners, and records from 1795 list 5 enslaved men who were directly involved in building the White House. Beyond construction, slave labor was also used during the presidencies of Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, Jackson, Tyler, Polk, and Taylor, and beyond. Black people are still working in the White House. Enslaved individuals lived and worked in the mansion, serving as household staff and personal attendants. The United States Capitol, another iconic government building, was also built with enslaved labor. Between 1795 and 1801, hundreds of payments were made to slave owners for the labor of enslaved people who performed both grueling and skilled work. Please note that somebody was paid, but not the enslaved people. These facts underscore the deep entanglement of slavery with the foundations of American political power. The legacy of slave labor continues to shape and benefit the United States in indirect but powerful ways, especially through systemic structures and economic foundations that were built during slavery and persist today. American capitalism was built on the backs of enslaved people. Industries like banking, insurance, and textiles profited directly from slavery, and those profits helped establish institutions that still exist today. White families and communities often inherited wealth, land, and social capital that originated from slavery. Meanwhile, Black Americans were systematically excluded from these opportunities, creating a racial wealth gap that remains stark. Slavery's legacy contributed to segregated schools and neighborhoods. These disparities were reinforced by policies like redlining and unequal school funding, which continues to benefit predominantly white communities. Areas with high slave populations historically suppressed black political participation. That suppression has had long term effects on voting patterns, representation, and political priorities. So, y'all, I could go on and on and on, but I'm going to stop here. I'm going to leave it here. So, this is how slavery, slave labor, and slave money is still working in America today, but it is not benefiting the descendants of the enslaved in the same way that it is benefiting the descendants of the slave owners. Okay, y'all, thank you for listening. Let me know what you think about this video and have a good evening.